Men, let's talk about exercise and raising testosterone. So if you're a guy in here that's over 35, maybe 40 plus, and you're in a low testosterone position, then my first thing to say is that context matters. You probably don't have a very good metabolism running right now, meaning you are not going to be able to handle the high intensity, high volume kind of resistance training that many of the gurus are out there telling you you need to raise your testosterone. It will actually make you worse. Okay, so if you find yourself in a low testosterone, low energy position and you're over 35, then you are going to want to go here. If you want to figure out and understand the main principles to turning your testosterone around, check out my other video on those two main principles. But exercise is actually not going to be the primary mover, the big mover for raising testosterone. It will help, however, and I'm going to show you how in a low metabolism, low efficiency metabolism state, how you can use exercise to improve both your metabolism and slowly raise that testosterone. Okay, here is an overview of how you want to approach it. You're talking 80% of what you're going to do is going to be in this realm right here. And this sounds really easy. It sounds too easy, but this is truly where you want to put most of your time and effort for several reasons. We won't go into all of them right now, but what you're going to start with, if you aren't already, is just getting in 20 to 30 minutes of a walk every day. Once you establish that habit, then you're going to add some weight to a backpack, and we call that rucking. You could begin with just 10 pounds in the backpack and then move up 5 pounds per month. Just slowly increase. The max you want to get to is about 20% of your body weight. So for a 200-pound man, that's about 40 pounds at the most. And then you can also progress where you ruck and walk. So if you begin on level surfaces, you can increase to rucking on trails with hills and whatnot. All right, so that's 80% of your activity and exercise, which is going to help especially push this metabolism forward without raising cortisol. And that's the key, because cortisol is probably the main thing, along with estrogen most likely, that's keeping your metabolism low. So adding a whole bunch of high intensity exercise on top of your already low metabolism state is only going to push that metabolism even lower. So things like walking and rucking here are going to improve and increase some of your strength and stimulating muscle, while also helping with things like blood sugar, helping you get some sunlight in your eyes. Obviously, if you're outside doing the walking, and it's going to do all of those things without raising your cortisol. All right, number two, the other 20% is going to be split between these two pieces. So ideally, I'm guessing a lot of you guys are probably sitting in an office chair most of the day. Hitting some of these intervals throughout the day is going to be super helpful for you. Intervals meaning just hitting maybe 15 seconds of this somewhat high intensity movement. These are some examples here. Would do a couple things for you. Number one, it's not going to raise cortisol because it's only 15 seconds of work. Number two, we get some of that high intensity piece in there, and that's going to help with really what we're aiming to do is help your cardiovascular system, help your HRV, your heart rate variability. And this is especially important if you sit for work for the most part, even 4 or 5 hours a day sitting. You're going to want to make sure to do these. The more you sit, the more you're going to want to dedicate more of this 20% to this. All right. Aiming just for 15 seconds of work, spread throughout the day, 3 times a day or so. And that piece is, again, more for cardiovascular health. Now, the other piece you can add in there to actually get the resistance training, which is going to be that little piece that's going to help stimulate testosterone. Remember, it's not the main driver, but it's going to help. It's also going to help you put some muscle tissue on, which is going to help with the low metabolism issue. All right, so I have what's called the grease the groove method. That's not my method. That's something another guy that I can't pronounce his last name made up. And so the idea here is that you do heavy lifts Ideally, you have a barbell. You could use dumbbells. You could even use body weight. Even though it's harder, you're going to have to find an exercise that's very difficult for you. And what you're going to do is set something up so that you can hit 2 to 3 exercises, only a few reps, and then what you're going to do is spread that out throughout the whole day, somewhat like the intervals. That doesn't always work for people, just because, if you're not working from home and you have a home gym, or if you are not at an office where you have equipment available or space available, it's just not going to work. So it doesn't work for everyone, but this is the ideal way. If you have to use a gym and you only have 45 minutes or an hour, then you can still use this method. What I would do is just search Grease the Groove on YouTube, and you'll find a bunch of different explanations on that. I think I have a video on that too. All right, so that's your big picture of exercise in the context of low metabolism. Now, there's a couple other pieces that are important from a bioenergetic view of how to exercise. One of the main things we talked about a little bit already with metabolism, raising testosterone, fat loss is going to come along with all of those things. But again, exercise is not the primary fat loss tool. Really, raising your metabolism is the primary tool. All right. However, we want more muscle tissue. So muscle tissue does a ton for us, besides just being kind of like a bigger engine in the car that requires more energy to burn. It is our low-grade fat-burning system. We don't want to burn fat fast or in big chunks, because then we will regain it fast and in big chunks. So we want the slow burn, and the more muscle tissue you have, the more slow fat burning you have, the higher your metabolism is going to be. More muscle tissue means less visceral fat. That's especially that belly fat. That's usually driven by cortisol. And of course, muscle tissue is one of the greatest predictors of longevity, survival of traumas, and we could just go on and on and on. All right, let's hit some of those principles for muscle building. So one of the things that will help is, of course, to have less fat tissue on you. And that's because both those stress hormones, estrogen and cortisol, are going to work against building muscle. They're going to block muscle growth. That also means they're going to block testosterone creation in the body, and the impotence on the body to create the impetus, not impotence, the impetus on the body to create testosterone. All right, so some things we want to really avoid are the really high volume, long endurance type exercise. This kind of exercise, the long, slow jogs, the kind of running where you're working up to your lactic threshold, where you can't really breathe well, all that stuff is going to increase lactic acid. It's going to push against our metabolism. It's going to also bring down your immune system. It's going to bring down your body temperature. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to do a ton of eccentric, that means slow lowering training. So that's the kind of training that bodybuilders often perform and encourage. And that's not actually giving us a lot of muscle density. That just puts a lot of fluid in your muscle tissue. So it also creates a ton of lactate, which we don't want. That's going to decrease mitochondria. That's what gives you your metabolism. So we don't want that slow eccentric or slow, reps and tons of reps kind of lifting. All right, we're going to skip forward here to exercises that we want to favor. The kinds of exercise we want is on the opposite end, the concentric. So concentric types of movements are movements where the muscle is under load and the muscle is shortening. The muscle is under load and it's shortening. So these are some examples of what that would look like. You can even do the big lifts or biceps curls and all those things. You can work on doing the eccentric part, letting gravity do most of the work, and focus on the concentric part, which is one way to do it, or just try to hit some of these exercises. We want to really try to avoid that lactate zone. So the way you're avoiding it is that you can breathe through your nose the whole time, both in and out on the majority. This is going to be hard to do when you're lifting perhaps, if you're doing more than just a couple reps, but everything else you're doing you should be able to nose breathe in and out. All right, and then we talked about getting some high intensity, but remember, that's part of your 20% or less. The 80% is this stuff where you can breathe in and out of your nose with no big difficulty. Okay, let's summarize it here. We've said exercise is not the primary fat loss tool. It's also not the primary way to raise your testosterone, although it is very helpful. It's also not the primary way to increase your metabolism, but it is helpful. Again, you're building muscle tissue slowly. That is going to be very helpful, but it's not the primary tool. One of the primary tools is cutting down the cortisol, estrogen, the stress hormones. All right. The main muscle building, I don't think I mentioned this yet, the time that you want to increase that resistance training, that 20% we talked about, is when you are in a high metabolism state. Once you're in that higher state, then it's time to really turn that up some more. You can do more of the high intensity stuff. I still would never really advocate, anything, maybe a half marathon is maybe the tops. Anything over that is going to start to work against you, but you can do more resistance training, more high intensity stuff when you're in a state of high metabolism. High metabolism is going to equal high testosterone as well. Those things go together. Keep in mind, super high volume, really long endurance stuff crushes your metabolism. If you crush your metabolism, you are going to crush your opportunity to make testosterone. All right, same thing with HIIT training. So know your stress state. Know that this longer high intensity stuff and the long endurance stuff all contributes to increasing your cortisol and your estrogen, and those feed inflammation. Here's another one with nutrition. Exercise in a carb-fueled state. That means like 100% juice is fantastic. Whole fruits have some of these. Even white rice is okay. Potatoes, usually okay for most people. They tolerate them well. If you tolerate them, those are a great fuel to exercise with. Don't do fasted exercise. Okay, that is going to absolutely work against you. Absolutely increase your cortisol, glucagon, estrogen through cortisol. So don't do that. We want to keep those things low. So make sure you are exercising in a fed state. Like we said, avoid the lactate buildup. That means you should be able to nose breathe during exercise with everything except perhaps some of that high intensity lifting. And then emphasize the concentric work. That is muscle shortening portion. That's going to be more helpful for increasing your mitochondria and not raising lactate. When you do a lot of that eccentric work, the bodybuilder type work, you're going to increase lactate, and it actually is damaging to the mitochondria overall, and that's not going to help your metabolism. All right. Hopefully those tools were helpful. All of these tools in this document actually is in our school group. So check out school, that's SKOOL.com, and our course, I'll have a link for it, but our group is called Raise Your T. Okay, men, hopefully that was helpful. Let's get after it.